Lyra Mae sat in the cold, dimly lit cell aboard the alien ship, her arms bound to the walls with metallic restraints that burned her skin. She could hear the low hum of the ship's engines vibrating through the floor, a constant reminder of her captivity. The aliens who had captured her, slavers from a distant star system, had dismissed humanity as weak. They didn't understand what they had taken. She leaned her head back against the cold metal, her mind racing. The aliens were arrogant, confident in their technology and power. They thought her voice, her greatest weapon, was nothing more than the soft, beautiful tones of an opera singer. To them, she was just another fragile human. But Lyra knew better. Music had always been more than just a passion for her. It was a secret, dangerous part of her, hidden from the world. A power she had never fully understood, until now. Lyra had never intended to be a weapon. When she was young, she sang because it made her feel alive. It was a way to escape the chaos of the world, to lose herself in something pure and beautiful. Her voice had always been special, strong, clear, capable of moving people to tears. But she had never realized that her singing was more than just a gift. It had been honed, perfected, turned into something that could shake the very foundations of the universe. The alien slavers, led by their cruel commander Sakaar, had underestimated her. They had taken her from Earth, from her family, from everything she knew, believing she was weak. They had no idea that her voice carried the power to destroy, to break, to shatter everything around her. Earth's secret defense program had weaponized her gift, turning her into something much more than a mere singer. She was a living weapon, a sonic force capable of tearing apart ships, cracking minds, and shaking stars themselves. As the hours dragged on in the prison cell, Lyra tried to calm her racing thoughts. She knew that if she wanted to survive, she would need to keep her power hidden, at least for a little while longer. The aliens didn't know what they had brought aboard their ship. They would soon learn. She thought back to the day she was selected by the Earth military, unaware of the program they had been running in secret. A program designed to create a new kind of weapon, one that could not only defend Earth, but defeat any enemy, no matter how powerful. Lyra's voice had been at the center of it all. It was her voice, amplified and enhanced, that had been chosen to be the weapon that could stop invaders cold. As her thoughts drifted back to that moment, she remembered her training, the scientists who had shown her what her voice could do. She had resisted at first, unable to accept the reality of what they were asking her to become. But she couldn't deny the power that lay within her. And now, it seemed, she was about to be forced to use it. The door to her cell opened with a soft hiss. A tall alien, his skin a dull gray, stepped inside. His face was hard, unfeeling, as he looked down at her. He was Sakaar, the leader of the slavers. Lyra had seen him only once before, and even then his eyes had radiated cold cruelty. He stood before her now, a towering figure, his long claws curling into fists at his sides. "You are human," Sakaar said in a voice that was more of a growl than words. "Weak, pathetic creatures. You will sing for us. You will entertain us as we conquer your world." Lyra didn't respond. She had learned early on that words were meaningless in a place like this. The only thing that mattered was survival. And if she was going to survive, she had to keep them in the dark about what her voice could truly do. But Sakaar wasn't interested in conversation. He moved toward her, his sharp eyes narrowing as he studied her. "Sing for us, human. Let us see if your kind can provide anything of value." Lyra knew what he wanted. He wanted to hear the beautiful music that had made her famous. He didn't realize that the moment she opened her mouth, it would be the beginning of something far more dangerous, something that even he wouldn't be able to control. She took a deep breath, her lungs filling with air as her voice began to rise. The first note was soft, like a whisper, but even that seemed to shake the walls of the ship. She held the note, her throat vibrating as the sound spread outward, filling the small space around her. The air seemed to shimmer with the power of it, the very fabric of reality bending under its pressure. Zekar looked at her, his eyes widening in surprise. But he didn't understand. He didn't know that the true power of her voice had only just begun to show itself. Lyra's hands shook as she continued to sing, each note resonating through the ship, rattling the metal walls. The sound was pure, untainted by fear or doubt. It was the power of the earth weaponized, beautiful, dangerous, and unstoppable. As the song continued, the ship's lights flickered, the engines stuttering as though they could no longer handle the pressure of her voice. Lyra could feel the tension building in the air, the crackling of energy that surged around her. The ship groaned, the sound of its structure beginning to crack under the strain of her song. Zekar's expression shifted from curiosity to panic. He took a step back, his hand reaching for the control panel on the wall. But it was too late. The power of her voice was already overwhelming the ship's systems. The walls shook more violently now, the ship's hull beginning to warp, the metal bending as though it were made of paper. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest as she continued to sing, unable to stop herself. She knew what she was doing. She could feel it, the destruction, the chaos that her voice could unleash. But she also knew that if she stopped, she might lose control completely. And that would be even worse. As the ship's systems began to fail, Zekar let out a growl of frustration. Stop, stop. But Lyra couldn't. The sound, the music, it was too powerful. It surged through her, as though it were a living thing, pushing her beyond the limits of her control. The song was no longer just a song. It was a force of nature, a weapon with a life of its own. And then, just as suddenly as it had started, the music stopped. The ship was silent, its systems grinding to a halt. Zekar stood frozen in shock, staring at Lyra with wide eyes. The walls of the ship were bent and twisted, smoke rising from the broken electronics. Lyra felt the exhaustion wash over her body trembling as the weight of what she had just done settled on her. Zekar stared at her, his voice low and threatening. You think you can control that power, human? You are nothing. You cannot stop us. We are the rulers of this galaxy. But Lyra only looked at him, her voice steady and calm. You have no idea what you've just unleashed. And as the alien leader glared at her, Lyra knew that this was only the beginning. Her voice was no longer just her own. It was a weapon, a force that could change the fate of entire worlds. And she had no choice but to embrace it before it was too late. Lyra's voice began softly, almost as a whisper, but the moment the sound left her lips, the alien ship trembled. It was a strange feeling, like she was waking something deep within the ship's structure, something ancient and fragile. The low hum of the engines became a vibration under her feet, but it wasn't just the ship that was shaking. It was as if the very fabric of space around them was reacting, warping under the pressure of her voice. The aliens had no idea what they were dealing with. Zekar's eyes widened as the walls shuddered and a loud crack echoed from somewhere deep within the ship's bowels. The slavers scrambled in panic, shouting orders that no one could hear over the deafening sound of Lyra's song. She could feel the power inside her growing, an energy she had never fully understood, but had always known was there. It wasn't just a song. It was a force, a weapon that had been designed by Earth's top scientists in the darkest of secret programs, a weapon built from beauty and emotion, capable of breaking the very bones of a planet. As the sound filled the room, she remembered the moment when everything changed for her. She had been an opera singer, a star in the human world, performing in theaters filled with adoring fans. But the government had other plans. The Earth military had come to her with a proposition, one she couldn't refuse. They had known her voice was special, but they didn't just want her to sing. They wanted to weaponize her. They wanted to turn her into something much darker than a mere singer, something that could destroy, something that could defend humanity in ways no weapon ever could. The program had been top secret, hidden from the public. They had enhanced her voice, tested its limits, and pushed her to the edge of exhaustion. But it had been worth it. She had become something else, something they could control. The music had been manipulated, shaped into a sonic force capable of causing earthquakes, cracking ships in half, and ripping apart minds. It wasn't just a weapon, it was a way of life for her now. But she had never intended to use it like this. She had never intended for her music to become destruction. Back in the present, Lyra's voice swelled, the sound building in intensity. The walls of the alien ship cracked under the pressure, metal screeching as if it were alive. She could hear the sound of the ship's hull bending, groaning under the force of her power. The alien slavers, once so confident, were scrambling now, trying to stop her, to figure out how to control her. But there was no stopping it. Her voice was beyond their comprehension. It was beyond her comprehension. Sakaar roared, his deep voice attempting to issue commands over the chaos, but nothing could break through the force of Lyra's song. His clawed hands shot out to the control panel in an attempt to shut her down, but the screen sparked and fizzled, blacking out as her voice continued to tear through the ship. The lights in the corridor flickered and then went out completely, leaving them in complete darkness except for the eerie glow of the ship's damaged systems. Lyra's breath came faster now, and her mind raced with fear and confusion. She had never wanted this. She never wanted to be this weapon. And yet here she was, her voice ripping apart the ship around her, destroying everything in its path. But then, as the ship's hull began to break apart, a new sound cut through the chaos, a voice, cold and commanding, one that Lyra knew was not Sakaar's. It was something else. The alien queen, the true power behind the invasion, stepped into the room, her presence filling the space with a chilling authority. The queen was a towering figure, her dark, slick form nearly glowing in the dim light of the ruined ship. Her eyes were pools of blackness, as if they could see through everything. She stood unmoving, watching Lyra as the last echoes of her song faded. Lyra's voice stopped, but the damage was done. The ship was now barely holding together, and the alien slavers were scattered in panic. "You," the queen said, her voice cold and alien, yet strangely resonant, as though it carried the weight of 1,000 worlds. "You are the weapon they spoke of, the human with the power to break us." Lyra stared at her, her throat raw from the strain of singing, her body trembling. She had heard of the queen before, in passing, rumors from the military intelligence reports that had been drummed into her mind during her training. The Zorith Queen, a ruthless conqueror who had been behind the invasion of Earth, was now standing before her. "I didn't ask for this," Lyra whispered, her voice barely a rasp. "I didn't ask to be your weapon." The queen's gaze softened, but only slightly, as if she were considering Lyra as a curious specimen rather than a threat. "But you are, nonetheless, and now I will harness that power for my own. You will be the instrument of Earth's destruction." Lyra's heart raced as she realized the truth. This wasn't just a fight for survival. The queen had already seen the potential in her, the power that her voice could unleash. Earth was no longer just under threat. Lyra was the key to the entire war. "No," Lyra said, her voice gaining strength. "You will never control me. I won't be your weapon." The alien queen tilted her head, studying her. "You may resist now, but resistance is futile. Your song will be my army's weapon. It will tear your world apart, just as you have torn my ship." Lyra's mind spun. What had she done? What had she unleashed? She could feel the weight of the queen's gaze, a silent promise that this was just the beginning of something far worse. She had become a weapon. And if she didn't act fast, the entire galaxy would know her name, for all the wrong reasons. The queen's smile was cold, confident. "You will sing, Lyra Mae. And when you do, the stars themselves will tremble." Lyra shook her head. "I won't. I refuse." But deep inside, she could feel the pull of her power, the way the music rose within her, begging to be released. Her voice was both a gift and a curse, and she knew that if she didn't control it, it would consume her, just as it had consumed everything else. And then, as the queen stepped closer, her eyes narrowing, Lyra realized there was no escape from the path that had been set for her. She had already chosen. The question now was whether she would use her voice to destroy the invaders, or whether she would be destroyed by the very power she had never asked for. The queen raised her hand, a final command. "Sing for me, human. Sing for your world's end." Lyra's heart hammered in her chest. She didn't want to, but as she stared into the alien queen's eyes, she knew there was no turning back. The song was within her. It always had been. And whether she wanted it or not, she would have to face the true cost of her power. Part 3. Lyra stood frozen in the wreckage of the alien ship, the queen's presence like a heavy weight pressing down on her chest. The cold, unblinking eyes of the alien queen never left her, studying her, calculating her every move. Lyra could feel the pull of that gaze, an invisible force trying to draw her in, to break her resolve. The sound of the broken ship's walls groaning under strain was the only other sound in the room, echoing like a warning. "You have a choice, Lyra Mae." The queen's voice echoed through the stillness, cold and commanding. "Join me. Embrace the power of your voice, and together, we will rule the galaxy. We will bring order to the stars, order that the chaotic humans could never hope to achieve. I admire your strength, your beauty, your power. It is rare to find someone with such potential." Lyra's heart pounded. She tried to steady her breath, but the queen's words clawed at her, stirring doubts she had spent so long suppressing. It was tempting, so tempting. The idea of joining forces, of becoming something greater than a singer, but that wasn't who she was. She wasn't some weapon to be wielded by an alien queen. She was a human, and she had a world to protect. "I will never join you," Lyra said, her voice shaky but firm. She took a step back, as if to distance herself from the queen's influence. "You can't control me. You won't control me." The queen's lips curled into a thin smile. "You misunderstand, Lyra. It's not about control. It's about power. And power is the only thing that matters in this universe. You have a gift, one that could change everything. You could save your people. Imagine what we could accomplish together. The universe would bow before us." Lyra shook her head. The queen's words echoed in her mind, trying to break her resolve. What if she could save Earth? What if this was the only way to end the war and bring peace? What if? No, she couldn't. She had to stay true to herself. She had to stay human. "You may have the power to destroy everything," the queen continued, her voice low, almost coaxing, "but you also have the power to build, to reshape worlds. Don't be foolish. Join me, and I will spare your planet. I will give you everything you've ever wanted. No more running, no more hiding. You will be revered as a goddess. You will have the galaxy at your feet." Lyra felt her mind flicker with a memory, a flash of warmth, of home. Her mother's soft smile, her father's reassuring presence, the way they had always told her to stand strong, to never give up, no matter how hard things got. Earth had been her home, her sanctuary, her family. She couldn't lose that. She couldn't let everything they had built be destroyed by the queen's twisted vision of order. Tears blurred her vision as the memories flooded back. She remembered her mother, holding her close as she sang lullabies, her father's deep voice comforting her after every nightmare. They had given her a life filled with love, a life that had been her anchor, the very thing that kept her grounded in the storm of her newfound power. She had always known her voice was special, but she had never imagined it would come with this kind of weight, the weight of life and death, the weight of choice, the weight of her people's survival. "No," she whispered, more to herself than to the queen. "I won't do it. I won't become what you want me to be." The queen's eyes narrowed, and her smile faded into something darker, more predatory. "So be it," she said, her tone laced with venom. "But understand this, Lyra Mae. Your refusal won't save your precious Earth. It only delays the inevitable." Lyra swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" The queen's lips curled into a cruel smile, and she stepped closer, her voice now a dangerous whisper. I am not the only one who seeks to bring Earth to its knees. My soldiers are already preparing a new assault. They will begin their attack in just a few hours. And this time, I won't stop them. Your people won't be able to withstand the full force of our assault. No one will be left to stop us." Lyra's stomach twisted as the Queen's words sank in. The weight of her decision hit her harder than ever before. There was no time. The Queen wasn't bluffing. The invasion was about to begin in full force, and if Lyra didn't act now, Earth would fall. The Queen turned away, walking toward the shattered control panel, her long, sleek form exuding an air of unshakable confidence. "You could have joined me. Together, we could have saved your world. But now, it will burn." Lyra felt a surge of fear and rage, but she fought it back, focusing on the fire that burned deep inside her. She had never asked for this power. She had never wanted to be a weapon. But now, she had no choice but to wield it. She clenched her fists, feeling the familiar pulse of energy build in her chest. Her voice was a force, a weapon, but it was hers to control. She wouldn't let the Queen win. She couldn't. As the Queen activated the ship's communication system, signaling her troops to prepare, Lyra made a decision. She had to stop them. She had to stop this invasion before it was too late. And to do that, she would have to use the one thing she never wanted to use again, the full power of her voice. But could she really do it? Could she become the weapon they wanted her to be? Was there another way? The sound of the alien ships moving into position outside the broken windows brought her back to reality. She had no time to think. She had to act. In that moment, Lyra realized something. She wasn't just fighting for Earth anymore. She was fighting for herself, for her humanity, for the people she loved, and for the future she wanted to protect. She wasn't going to let anyone take that away. With a deep breath, she closed her eyes and began to sing. The first notes were soft, tentative, like a whisper of wind. But as the song built, it grew in power, filling the room, shaking the very foundations of the alien ship. The walls groaned in protest, the ship's systems beginning to malfunction once more as Lyra's voice filled every corner of the vessel. Outside, the alien soldiers halted in their tracks, their weapons falling silent as they felt the power of her voice rippling through the air. Lyra wasn't just singing anymore. She was fighting. And she wasn't going to stop until Earth was safe. But the Queen was right about one thing. Time was running out. Lyra's pulse raced as she sprinted down the dark, twisted corridors of the alien stronghold. The walls seemed to close in around her, the air thick with the metallic scent of burning systems. She couldn't stay here. She had to escape before the Queen or her soldiers found her. But there was something more urgent than the looming threat of capture, something that clawed at the back of her mind, something she had to understand. The memory of the Queen's words echoed in her ears as she rounded a corner and came to an abrupt halt. "Your voice is not just a weapon. It is a key," the Queen had said, as though those words alone could hold all the answers. But what did that mean? How could something so beautiful, so pure, be turned into such destruction? Her hand shook as she pulled a small device from her pocket, a communicator she had stolen from the Queen's command center. She quickly hacked into the system, the familiar hum of the device filling her ears as it accessed hidden files. The alien technology buzzed around her, alive with encrypted data, each line seeming to pulse like a heartbeat. She wasn't sure what she was looking for. Some explanation, some reason. But she needed it. Now. As the screen flickered, the data spilled out before her. Mission logs, weapon schematics, Earth's defense protocols. And then, buried deep within, she found it. The file labeled Lyra Mae. Subject 1. She gasped, stumbling backward, her eyes widening in disbelief as she opened the file. Her breath caught in her throat. The words seemed to burn through her skull, too shocking to comprehend. The document detailed Earth's covert plan to weaponize her voice, to turn her into a living, breathing weapon. She wasn't just an opera singer with a powerful voice. She had been part of a secret military project from the start. They had known. They had known what she was capable of before she ever did. It was all there, in black and white. An experiment designed to enhance human vocal cords, creating a sound that could shatter ships, bend minds, and destroy entire armies. Earth's top scientists had known about the aliens long before the first invasion, and they had created her to fight back. She was their ultimate weapon, designed to be used in the shadows of war, never meant to see the light of day. She closed her eyes, her breath coming in shallow gasps. How had she not known? All those years of singing, of being celebrated for her talent, had it all been a lie? She had thought her voice was a gift, a blessing. But now she understood that it had always been a tool, a weapon, waiting to be unleashed. She had been groomed for this, trained to destroy. Lyra shook her head, the weight of it too much to bear. She couldn't let this be true. She couldn't be just another pawn in a game of intergalactic politics. She was more than that. She had to be more than that. Her eyes flicked back to the screen as another file opened, one she hadn't noticed before. The title made her stomach churn. Alien Connection. Unintended Consequences. She hesitated, but curiosity overcame her. She had to know. She clicked on it. What she read sent a shiver down her spine. The file spoke of an alien race that Earth had been tracking long before the invasion, the Zoreth. They were not the first species to come into contact with humanity's secret program. Lyra's voice, the very sound that had been weaponized to fight the invaders, had a link to something older, something deeper. The Zoreth had been experimenting with humans long before Earth had begun its own project. They had somehow found a way to tie their technology into human biology, fusing their own DNA with Earth's to create a hybrid species, and Lyra, unknowingly, was a key to unlocking that hybrid connection. Her voice wasn't just the product of Earth's military design. It was something far older, far more dangerous. A message appeared on the screen, a string of text that made her stomach lurch. Subject 1's voice is not solely human. It carries the genetic resonance of the Zoreth. Unleash the song, and the gateway opens. She froze, staring at the words. What did that mean? Her voice, her gift, was tied to the very aliens she was fighting against. Had she been part of their plans all along? Had they been manipulating her, controlling her fate before she ever knew it? Her heart pounded in her chest as her mind raced. If the Zoreth had been behind her creation, behind the weaponization of her voice, then the Queen hadn't been lying when she said Lyra was more than just a weapon. She was something more, a bridge, a conduit between two worlds, two forces that had been in conflict for centuries. But what did it all mean? How could she possibly reverse this? Was it too late to escape her destiny? A sudden noise interrupted her thoughts. The ship's alarms blared to life, signaling an incoming attack. Lyra's heart skipped a beat. She had no time to process the implications of what she had just uncovered. The Queen's forces were already on their way to Earth, and she was the only one who could stop them. She turned away from the screen, her mind reeling. The weight of the information she had just uncovered pressed down on her shoulders, but there was no time to waste. She had to warn Earth. She had to stop the Queen, before it was too late. But as she moved to leave the room, a strange message flashed on the screen, a new line of text appearing that made her blood run cold. Time is not on your side, Lyra. The past has already been written, and the song will play again. Her breath caught in her throat. She didn't know who had left the message or how it had gotten there, but the words felt like a warning, a prophecy. It was as if someone, or something, was trying to tell her that no matter what she did, the end was already sealed. Lyra didn't know what it all meant, but one thing was clear. She was no longer just a pawn. She was the key to something much larger. And whether she liked it or not, she had to play her part. With a final glance at the screen, she turned and ran, knowing that the battle for Earth was just beginning, and that the truth about her voice was only the beginning of a much darker journey ahead. The Queen's forces were coming, and Earth's future rested in Lyra's hands. Lyra's heart pounded as she stood at the edge of Earth's atmosphere, staring down at the planet she had fought so hard to protect. The countdown echoed in her ears, a relentless reminder that time was running out. The alien queen's forces were already descending, their ships cutting through the stars like knives through the fabric of space. Earth's defenses were faltering. It was up to her now. Her breath was shallow, the weight of her decision pressing on her chest like 1,000 suns. She had come back to Earth not as a hero, but as the last hope for survival. Her voice, once a gift, had become the weapon humanity had never asked for. It could destroy, and it could save. But at what cost? As she prepared for the final confrontation, a flicker of doubt crept into her mind. Was she really ready for this? Was she willing to give everything, even her humanity, to protect a world that had never fully understood her? The ground beneath her shook as the alien ships began their descent, casting long shadows over the cities below. The battle had already begun, but it wasn't just any war. It was a war for the soul of Earth itself, and Lyra was the battleground. She took a deep breath, letting the cool air fill her lungs as she closed her eyes. Memories of her family, her friends, the concerts and the peaceful days before all this chaos flashed before her. They seemed like a lifetime ago, a world that no longer existed. But those memories, those fragments of a life she once knew, gave her strength. They gave her purpose. She opened her eyes, and the decision was made. There was no turning back. A roar filled the air as the first wave of alien ships broke through the atmosphere, their massive hulls casting a dark shadow over the land. Lyra's heart raced as she stepped forward, her feet barely touching the ground as her body seemed to hum with the energy that had been growing inside her since she first discovered her true nature. The power that flowed through her now was unlike anything she had ever experienced before. Her voice, once a beautiful instrument of music, was now a weapon, a force capable of shattering the heavens. The sound that escaped her lips was pure, perfect, and destructive. The air around her vibrated, and the alien ships trembled as her song rippled through the fabric of space. It was a haunting melody, a force of nature that shook the very stars. The ships faltered, their systems malfunctioning, their crews screaming in terror as the sound cracked through their hulls. The alien ships exploded in a brilliant burst of light, disintegrating into dust and debris as Lyra's voice tore through them like a blade. But with every use, she could feel it, her body growing weaker, her energy draining. Each note, each scream, felt like a piece of her soul was being torn away. She had to be careful. If she used too much, too quickly, she wouldn't be able to stop the invasion. And if she didn't stop it, the Earth would fall. Another wave of alien ships appeared, more numerous than before. Their numbers seemed endless, but Lyra didn't hesitate. She opened her mouth again, letting the sound of her voice fill the air. The ground shook as another burst of energy shot through the sky, ripping through the approaching fleet. The alien ships exploded one by one, their destruction echoing like thunder across the world. The power surged within her, but each blast took more from her. She could feel her strength waning, her body breaking down with each passing second. But there was no time for hesitation. She had no choice but to fight. As she sang, she could see the faces of those she was fighting for, the people of Earth, the ones who had no idea of the sacrifice she was making. They didn't know the cost of her power, the price she was paying to save them. But they would never understand. They couldn't. The battle raged on. The sky above Earth darkened by the endless assault. The alien ships continued to fall, one by one, until only a few remained. But Lyra's body was growing weaker, her voice growing hoarse. She could feel the power inside her flickering, the once unstoppable force now becoming a faint whisper. Just when it seemed the last of the invaders would fall, the ground trembled beneath her feet. The alien queen herself descended from the heavens, her massive ship blocking out the sun. Lyra's breath caught in her throat as the queen's voice boomed across the battlefield. "You think you can stop me, little singer. You are nothing. You are just a tool, a weapon. And I have more like you." Lyra's heart froze as the Queen's words sank in. There were others like her, others who had been created for this very purpose. She wasn't the only one. Earth's greatest weapon, the thing that had made her so unique, was not unique at all. She had been just another piece in a much larger game. The alien Queen's ship hovered above her, its presence a weight that threatened to crush her. The Queen herself emerged from the ship, her form massive and imposing. Her eyes glowed with an otherworldly fire, and her voice echoed with the power of 1,000 wars. "You have no idea what you are up against, Lyra Mae," the Queen said, her voice dripping with contempt. "You think you can save this pitiful planet. You are nothing but a weapon, and I will break you just as I have broken the others." Lyra's knees trembled beneath her as the Queen's words hit her like a physical blow. She had never felt so small, so insignificant. But as the Queen's laughter echoed through the battlefield, something inside Lyra clicked. She wasn't just a weapon. She was more than that. She was humanity's hope, and she would not let it slip away. With one final desperate cry, Lyra unleashed everything she had left. Her voice ripped through the air like a sonic boom, cutting through the Queen's ship and shattering the ground beneath her feet. The Queen screamed as her ship disintegrated, her forces retreating in fear of the power that Lyra had unleashed. But even as the alien Queen fell, Lyra knew that the fight was far from over. She had won this battle, but there were more like her. More weapons, more lies, more battles to fight. As the dust settled, Lyra looked up at the sky. She was still standing. Earth had been saved for now, but the war was far from over. And Lyra would fight until her last breath. But as she staggered back, drained of all her energy, she couldn't help but wonder, how much more would she have to give before the music stopped? Lyra sat in the dimly lit room, her mind racing. The battle was over, but the war inside her was far from won. The victory against the alien Queen had felt hollow, the weight of her victory pressing down on her. She had saved Earth, but at what cost? The truth of her creation, her transformation into a weapon, was a bitter pill to swallow. She had thought that the aliens were the ones who had turned her into this thing, this living weapon of destruction. But now, the truth was more painful than she could have imagined. It wasn't the aliens. It was humans. The files she had found after escaping the alien stronghold had unraveled the truth. Earth's own secret military faction had engineered her transformation into a weapon. They had manipulated her, controlled her, and used her voice as a tool for global domination. She wasn't an accident. She was a project, a carefully planned mission. The faction had intended to use her power to control the galaxy, to bend entire worlds to their will. She closed her eyes, her hands trembling. All her life, she had thought that her voice was a gift. Something pure, something beautiful. But it wasn't a gift. It had been a weapon all along, designed by those she trusted the most, her own people. The betrayal cut deeper than any alien force ever could. "Lyra," a voice broke through her thoughts. She turned quickly, her breath catching in her throat as she saw him standing there. A man she had never expected to see again. Ethan. Ethan had once been part of the faction, a soldier in their covert operations. He had helped orchestrate her transformation, but now he stood before her, no longer wearing the same cold, calculated expression he had when they first met. His eyes were filled with regret, and there was something else, something that made her heart twist in an unfamiliar way. "I didn't know," Ethan said, his voice rough. "I didn't know what they were going to do to you." Lyra stared at him, her heart beating faster. "You didn't know?" she asked, disbelief lacing her voice. "You were part of this. You helped create me." "I didn't know it would go this far," Ethan said, stepping closer. "I thought it was just a project, a test. But when I saw what they were doing, I couldn't be a part of it anymore. I had to leave. I had to warn you." Lyra's mind was a storm. She couldn't trust him. He had been part of the faction that had used her, turned her into a weapon, and now he was standing here, asking for her forgiveness. She should hate him. She should have nothing to do with him. But there was something about the way he looked at her, something about the way his hands shook as he spoke, that made her pause. Maybe it was the vulnerability in his eyes, or maybe it was the fact that he was the only person who truly understood what she had been through. "Why are you here?" Lyra asked, her voice quieter now. "I'm here to help," Ethan replied. "There's a faction within the faction, rogue elements who are planning to use you again. They want to take control of the galaxy, and you're the key to that. They'll stop at nothing to make sure you do what they want. But if we can get to them first, we can stop it all. Together." Lyra hesitated. She had spent so much of her life fighting against the control others had over her. But this was different. This wasn't just about her. This was about the future of Earth, the future of the galaxy. And if Ethan was telling the truth, they had to stop this before it spiraled out of control. She nodded slowly, but as she did, a part of her felt something she couldn't ignore. There was a pull, a connection between them that had always been there, even in the darkest moments. "Okay," she said, her voice steady now. "But we do this together. No more secrets." Ethan nodded, a faint smile crossing his face. Together. The next few days were a blur of planning and strategy. Ethan had shown her the location of the rogue faction's hidden base, deep within a desolate sector of space. The place was a fortress, fortified and well guarded, but Lyra wasn't afraid. She had her voice, and she would use it to destroy anyone who stood in her way. As they traveled toward the base, Lyra couldn't help but notice the growing tension between her and Ethan. The way he would glance at her when he thought she wasn't looking, the way his voice softened when he spoke to her. It wasn't just guilt. It was something else, something she couldn't put into words. It had been so long since she had allowed herself to feel anything for anyone. The weight of her past, the constant battles, the isolation, it had all built walls around her heart. But with Ethan, those walls were beginning to crumble. As they neared the base, Lyra knew that the time for hesitation was over. They would confront the rogue faction, stop them from using her, and bring an end to this nightmare once and for all. But in the quiet moments before the final confrontation, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. The closer they got to the base, the more her heart twisted in her chest. She had a feeling that no matter what happened, she would lose something precious. She wasn't sure what it was: her humanity, her trust in herself, or maybe even Ethan. When they finally reached the base, the truth came crashing down. The faction had been expecting them. They had known they were coming. A trap. Ethan's face paled as the rogue faction's soldiers surrounded them. Lyra's heart raced, but she didn't falter. She stepped forward, ready to unleash everything she had. She would not be their pawn again. But as she opened her mouth, ready to sing, something inside her faltered. She felt Ethan's hand on her shoulder, a whisper of warmth in the coldness of the trap. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "but I have to do this. I never wanted to hurt you, Lyra. But they have my family. I had no choice." Lyra froze, the betrayal hitting her harder than anything she had ever felt before. Ethan had been working for them all along. He had known about the trap, and he had played her. He had used her. The pain was overwhelming, but it was nothing compared to the rage that burned in her chest. She had trusted him. She had let him in, and now he had betrayed her. With a scream, Lyra unleashed her power, tearing the trap apart, but as she did, she felt something inside her break. The walls that had kept her heart safe were gone, and she was left exposed, vulnerable. She had been betrayed, and there was no turning back now. As the base crumbled around her, Lyra's thoughts were a blur. Ethan was gone. The faction was shattered. But what would be left of her? What had she become? A weapon, a pawn in their game, someone who had lost everything. But as the dust settled, one thing became clear. Lyra was no longer someone's weapon. She was no longer anyone's pawn. She was her own person, and she would fight until the end. The battlefield was silent, save for the soft hum of the wreckage around them. The alien queen's forces had been scattered, But the war was far from over. Lyra stood at the heart of the chaos, her breath steady, her mind clear. She had come to terms with her power, with the truth of who she was, and now nothing would stop her. The rogue human faction had betrayed her, used her as a tool for their own gain. The alien queen had tried to bend her to her will. But now, Lyra was no one's pawn. She had learned to control the voice that had once been a weapon, a force of destruction. Now, it was her weapon of liberation, a tool of justice. And she would use it one last time. The alien queen, her form towering and imposing, stepped forward. Her eyes burned with anger, but there was something else in them now. Fear. She had underestimated Lyra, and now she was about to pay for it. You think you can defeat me? The queen hissed, her voice cold and alien. You are nothing but a song, a fleeting, fragile thing. You can't stand against the power of my forces. Lyra's lips curled into a faint smile. You're wrong, she said softly. It's not about the power of my voice. It's about the power of humanity. We create. We adapt, and when we fight, we evolve. The queen's eyes narrowed, her claws twitching. Your kind is weak. You will fall before me, just like all the others. Lyra's heart pounded in her chest. The queen's words were nothing but hollow threats now. She had seen the truth. Humanity's true strength wasn't in weapons or brute force. It was in their ability to grow, to create, to rise above. And that was exactly what she was going to do. Behind her, the rogue faction's soldiers began to regroup, ready to strike. They had thought they could control her, that they could use her for their own ambitions. But she had learned their game, and now she was in control. Enough, Lyra whispered to herself. She took a deep breath, closing her eyes for a moment. The song inside her stirred, a melody that had always been there, waiting to be unleashed. This time, it wasn't just a weapon. It was her voice, her humanity, and her soul. She stepped forward, her voice low at first, a single note that seemed to vibrate through the very air. The ground trembled beneath her feet, and the alien queen took a step back, her expression changing to one of disbelief. You can't control this, the queen said, her voice laced with panic. Lyra's note grew, rising in pitch and power. She let the music flow through her, not as a weapon, but as a force of creation. She could feel the alien queen's power faltering. The strength of her voice, amplified by the truth of who she was, began to unravel the control the queen had over her. The rogue faction's soldiers hesitated, confused by the sound, unsure of how to respond. Lyra didn't wait for them to make a move. She sang louder, her voice filling the battlefield, a crescendo that ripped through the air. The very fabric of reality seemed to bend as her song reached its peak. The alien queen roared, a sound of fury and desperation. But it was too late. Lyra's voice shattered her forces, crumbling them like brittle glass. The alien queen staggered back, her hands clawing at the air, as if trying to hold on to something that was slipping away. But Lyra wasn't finished. With a final, earth-shattering note, she let everything she had, everything she was, pour into the music. The battlefield shook with the force of it. The queen's soldiers screamed as they were torn apart by the raw power of Lyra's voice. The rogue faction's technology malfunctioned, their machines sparking and collapsing in on themselves. The queen fell to her knees, her power vanquished by the very thing she had tried to control. She looked up at Lyra, her eyes wide with fear and disbelief. How could you?" she gasped. Lyra stepped forward, her face calm but resolute. "You underestimated humanity," she said quietly. "You thought we were weak, but we're not. We don't just create beauty. We are beauty, and we are unstoppable." The alien queen's eyes narrowed in fury, but there was nothing she could do. Her forces were broken, her control lost. She was powerless. As the dust settled around them, Lyra looked up at the stars. They seemed to shine brighter now, as if in recognition of her victory. The galaxy had been saved, not by armies or weapons, but by the strength of one human's voice. The rogue faction had been exposed. Their plans had been shattered. They had thought they could use Lyra for their own gain, but in the end, it was she who had turned the tables. She had proven that humanity's strength lay not in domination, but in the ability to fight for what was right, to protect what mattered, and to evolve beyond the limits others tried to place on them. Lyra felt a strange sense of peace as she stood there, knowing that the battle was over. The galaxy was safe, and Earth was free. But more than that, she had reclaimed her own humanity. She was no longer just a weapon, a pawn in someone else's game. She was Lyra Mae, an opera singer who had become so much more. And as she gazed up at the stars, she knew that this was only the beginning. There was a whole universe out there, one that would learn to fear humanity, not because of their weapons, but because of their ability to create, to adapt, and to rise above. Humanity was unstoppable, and Lyra was proof of that.